I found an article on spamtitan.com that I figure we'll read together. It's titled, How Does DNS Filtering Work? It was written in 2019, in August. They start by saying, venture online and you'll be faced with a wide range of threats, some of which could result in your bank account being emptied, others could result, and so on. They're going to talk about all the bad things that can happen. More malicious websites are being created than legitimate sites. So how can you stay safe online? Is that true? More malicious sites are created than legitimate ones, huh? Well, one solution used by business and ISPs is the use of web filter. A web filter can be configured to restrict access to certain categories of internet content and block the majority of malicious websites. While it is possible for businesses or ISPs to purchase appliances that sit between end users and the internet, DNS filters allow the internet to be filtered without having to purchase any hardware or install any software. So my first question is, what's nice about DNS filtering? And apparently it's nice because you don't have to download any software or buy any hardware. But here we're looking for small details that might be overlooked when you first learn about DNS, such as when a domain is purchased from a domain register and that domain is hosted, it is assigned a unique IP address that allows a site to be located. When you attempt to access a website, a DNS query will be performed. Your DNS server will look up the IP address of the domain web page, which will allow a connection to be made between the browser and the server where the website is hosted. The web page will then be loaded. So a key point here is that it gets a unique IP address. While maybe the IP addresses at your home, they change randomly, or if we're talking about inside your home network using private IPs, those things can change. You yourself can change them at any time. Alright, so how does this work? With DNS filtering in place, rather than the DNS server returning the IP address if the website exists, the request will be subjected to certain controls. DNS blocking occurs if a particular web page or IP address is known to be malicious via blacklist. Alright, so it looks like they check against a blacklist. Or is determined to be potentially malicious by the web filter. Instead of being connected to the website the user was attempting to access, the user instead directed to a local IP address that displays a blocked page explaining why the site cannot be accessed. So how about I ask what's happening when a DNS filter is working? What happens is you go to a site, it says here a local IP address, you go to that address where it says what's going on, that the DNS filtering is blocking the site. A good follow-up question might be, how does the DNS filter determine what gets blocked? It determines this by using a blacklist. Now this control can be applied at the router level via your ISP or a third party, a web filtering service provider. In the case of the latter, the user, a business for instance, would point their DNS to the server provided, and that service provider maintains a blacklist of malicious web page IP addresses. And if a site is known to be malicious, access to malicious sites will be blocked. Since a service provider will also categorize web pages, the DNS filter can also be used to block access to certain categories of web pages. Like all these bad things they list there, provided a business creates an acceptable usage policy and sets that policy with the service provider, the AUP will be enforced. And since DNS filtering is low latency, there will be next to no delay in accessing safe websites that do not breach the organization's acceptable internet usage policy. So quick acronym check, what is a AUP? And another basic check here, why is low latency nice? It's nice because it's not going to slow down by much at all your internet browsing. Now this is a weird question to have because I think they just answered it already. Since they're using a blacklist, if something's not on the blacklist, well, then it can get through. And that's what they say here. Unfortunately, no. Alright, this is an interesting question. Can DNS filtering be bypassed? They say yes. Proxy servers, anonymizer sites could be used to mass traffic and bypass the DNS filter unless the chosen solution also blocks access to these anonymizer sites. An end user could also manually change their DNS settings locally unless they have been locked down. So in cybersecurity, we often talk about the employee being the biggest or the weakest link in the chain. Now, determined individuals may be able to find a way to bypass DNS filtering, but for most end users, a DNS filter will block any attempt to access forbidden or harmful website content. And so then I thought I'd jump over to the Wikipedia page here just so we have our basics down. So Wikipedia says domain name system blocking, or DNS blocking, filtering is a strategy for making it difficult for users to locate specific domains or websites on the internet. It was first introduced in 1997 as a means to block spam email from known malicious IP addresses. And so that's funny because we went to a website called Spam Titan to read that article. Now, DNS blocking can also be applied for outgoing requests as well. Instead of returning the valid IP address of a requested site, for example, instead of that IP number being returned by the DNS when wikipedia.org is entered into a browser, if this IP were on a block list, the DNS might reply that the domain is unknown or with a different IP address that directs to a site with a page stating that the requested domain is not permitted. The latter case, where the user is redirected to another destination, would be considered DNS spoofing, otherwise known as DNS poisoning. DNS blocking can be applied to individual server IP addresses or entire blocks of IP addresses for multiple reasons. Okay, so since synonyms are so confusing, I'm going to ask what's another name for DNS poisoning, and then I'm going to spell it correctly. Now, some public DNS resolvers like Quad9 and Clean Browsing offer filters as part of their DNS. Quad9, for example, blocks access to known phishing and malicious domains. Clean Browsing filters out adult content in their effort to protect kids online. So here I just say name DNS resolvers that offer filtering. So you could say Quad9, Clean Browsing, whatever you want. Now you have examples of such filtering. Now there's some legislation out there apparently. It says in addition to its technical impact, DNS blocking also has many social and political implications. Free speech and due process are key concerns regarding DNS blocking, particularly in the United States. DNS blocking was proposed to be mandated by the Stop Online Piracy Act, SOPA, and the Protect IP Act, PIPA. It is a technique that essentially breaks the fundamental architecture of the internet, and the goal of its use is intended by SOPA and PIPA is to prevent users from intentionally or unintentionally accessing websites and web services that are known to host copyrighted material without authorization. According to an article in Network World magazine, just about universally, the people responsible for the technical development and operation of the internet have said that the DNS blocking proposals would break vital internet technology while at the same time being entirely ineffectual against people who are serious about violating copyright laws. So I'm not taking one side or the other here, but I could ask, at least in their opinion, it says here the people responsible for the technical development and operation of the internet. I mean, that's a lot of people. But according to this paragraph, according to these people, why is such legislation pointless? And basically they're saying it won't do anything against those who violate copyright already. You put up a wall and they'll find an easy way around, over, or through the wall. Or even under. I mean, you don't have to be very skilled at working or developing on the internet, developing web pages in order to find a way around those barriers. Now they go on to claim that politicians who support this type of legislation are motivated by pressure from lobbyists and donors to their campaigns. These lobbyists and donors are often affiliated with special interest groups such as the MPAA and the RIAA. So here's some criticism of DNS blocking, I guess. Google's chairman, Eric Schmidt, is quoted saying, "I would be very, very careful if I were a government about arbitrarily implementing simple solutions to complex problems," in reference to DNS blocking and the PIPA bill. Experts claim that users could get around DNS blocking by using foreign search engines and foreign DNS servers. And in fact, within 2 months of the legislation being introduced, there were browser plugins released that enabled users to resolve blocked domains. So my question is, what's one way around DNS filters being implemented in America? The simple answer from the paragraph is that you could use foreign DNS servers. But if you're a sysadmin at a company or school or even at your own home, you can establish which DNS server you're using. And so if you're like trying to protect your family, you can make sure to use one with good DNS filtering. The article finishes by saying numerous industry experts have concerns regarding the effects of DNS blocking on the security of the internet, and a former Bush administration Department of Homeland Security policy director claimed that altering the domain name system would do great damage to internet security. I do not know where they're going with this. So when I click on the link, we go to a Wired.com article. Here's the title. The date is in 2012 though. Okay, so the first two paragraphs is all about the who. I'm looking more for the what and the why. Based on this paragraph, it sounds like they just want to remove DNS blocking from that one particular law, which laws are full of things. Okay, this first paragraph we see. Alright, now in this paragraph, they're talking about all the bad things that are happening because of copyright violations. The next paragraph is the other side of the coin about threatening openness and freedom online. This paragraph's interesting. It says both bills essentially grant the government the authority to bring lawsuits against so-called rogue websites and obtain court orders requiring search engines like Google to stop displaying links to them. That's like a lot more than just DNS filtering. It's forcing a private company to do research into the links they are offering the world, and that's, I can imagine, a huge problem for Google, or at least an expensive problem. Okay, so that article was not very helpful. There are politicians who want it, there are politicians who don't. So maybe the key to understanding this last paragraph was in the interpretation of this word altering. If the Department of Homeland Security has a policy director saying that you should allow it, or we should force people to do DNS filtering, this type of altering would maybe improve internet security. But also, if we force them to take it a step further and require companies like search engine companies to not display the links to these things that should be filtered out, well then that too would improve internet security. What a just horrible paragraph to end the article. Well, we got 4 questions. I hope that helps clarify a little bit about what DNS blocking is. And I highly recommend this YouTube channel, Lawrence Systems, if you wanted to see actual tools to execute this type of blocking.